What's going on, guys? This is the Brigade once again, and we're back at it with another session of Killzone Shadow Fall. Alright guys, I know it's been a few weeks since the last Killzone Shadow Fall video that I've uploaded, and definitely, best believe I've been missing it, right? There's been a lot of things going on, a lot of things for me to talk about, but one thing in particular that I want to talk about in this video is some of the changes that have been taking place lately. Now, one of the main changes that I want to talk about in this, at least in the first part of this video, is the featured war zones page, for which they have, obviously there have been a lot of people, either there have been a lot of people, or the people who they have listened to have such an important role that they felt like their feedback was needed. What they did was, originally there were 9 war zones featured on the front page, 3 of which would be Killzone, or actually Guerrilla Games featured war zones. Those war zones created by Guerrilla Games. The other 6, and I can't remember if it was 6 or 9. I don't have my PlayStation in front of me, but I'll say it was definitely at least 6. Right, so no more than 6, but up to 9. The rest would be war zones created by individual players. Now, in addition to that, they have tabs. One is a tab to where you can browse active war zones, which means any other war zones other than the ones that are featured on the main page. And then they have Warzone history. So in other words, if there was a war zone that you participated in, perhaps you done forgot the name of it, you can also browse the your Warzone history, and you can go straight back to the one that you originally played. Now, I guess the argument is that they wanted to centralize the player base, and based upon the numbers, they wanted to go ahead and get a lot of people concentrating in certain war zones. That I can understand. What I have a huge problem with, however, is that they featured the classic Warzone, which is only 7 players versus 7 players. Like this is freaking Titanfall or something. So as soon as I found this out, I went on the forums and I made a post basically saying, you guys are destroying this game for newcomers. And the reason why I will argue that they are destroying the game for newcomers is because, think about it. Let's just say, now keep in mind, I've had this game since November, and a lot of the people who frequent the forums have had this game since its release, many of them. So first off, it's kind of biased for them to only think with their own mind and to not think of a mind of a newcomer who know nothing about Killzone or know nothing about anything Killzone related. So in other words, some of their arguments are that it would be easier for newcomers if they were to feature a 7v7 as opposed to the standard 12v12, which it should be, in my personal opinion. And I'm just, by reading some of the responses from these people, I'm starting to be convinced that a lot of these personalities are brand new to Killzone. And here's why here's why I'm going to say that they're brand new to Killzone. Number one, Killzone 2 was not 7v7. Killzone 2 was at least 12v12. All right, I remember at one point, I think it was like 16, but it was definitely 12v12. They definitely had an option for 12v12. Killzone 3, 12v12. There was none of this crap about we need to make it more easy, more accessible, and all this other garbage. It was 12v12. Killzone has always been about chaos. This is not Call of Duty. This is not, Titanfall. This is Killzone. It had always, up until Shadow Fall, it had always been about chaos and gore, flat out. Dingy maps, grime. That was one thing that really attracted me to the Killzone franchise, because especially in Killzone 2, it really looked like a war zone. It was gritty, it was dingy, it was dirty. It looked like the place had received a lot of, munitions, combat, and everything else, because everything just looks so grimy. It was okay in Killzone 3, but in Killzone Shadow Fall is a lot more polished. Now, I understand that they wanted to really show off the potential of the PS4 and all that other things. And actually, I'm satisfied with the maps. But do I miss the grit and grind from previous titles, especially from Killzone 2? Yes, I do, because that's what Killzone is supposed to be about. Another thing, like I said before, Killzone is all about chaos, not this bullshit about, well, we need to make it more accessible for newer players. Dude, a lot of these people play a lot of clan matches and scrimmages, and they make comments based upon their own perspective. Now, if we're talking clan matches, I'm 100% fine with 7v7 or 5v5s, maybe even 3v3s if you're just kind of strapped for clan players. But I'm fine for those lower numbers. And as a matter of fact, speaking of clans, I would argue that you should even have 12v12. But in the event that you don't have that many participants, I would argue that 7v7s are perfect for clan matches or competitive war zones. Not basic war zones for everybody else to participate in. Not everybody else. No, because think about it. If they're trying to grow this player base, and assuming they're brand new to Killzone, and let's just say they came from Call of Duty, which have a lot larger player base, which basically the name of the franchise on its own is going to get it a large player base, okay? Or if you're coming from a game, let's just say like Battlefield, that has 64 players. Why would you be turned on by a game that, although it may look good, only offers 7v7s? It's horrible. It's a crazy idea. And a lot of these noobs and these casuals who are making these suggestions, they just can't come from Killzone. Because what Killzone vet, and once again, we're not talking about these clan people, because these clan people have different perspective. They have different views. They look at things based upon their scrims and their competitive teams. I'm fine with 7v7s and competitive matches, but not standard war zones for everyone else to enjoy. It should be a full Killzone experience, similar to Killzone 2, similar to Killzone 3. For all these scumbags who are asking for 7v7s, have you guys forgotten about Radix Academy? Have you guys forgotten about Pyrus Rise? Have you guys forgotten about Tharsis Depot? Have you guys really forgotten about Acmere Snowdrift? Have you guys forgotten about, I can go on and on and on. Killzone is not 7v7, and it's really a turnoff. If you're trying to pull people from other franchise and you're trying to draw their attention onto this game, please explain to me how 7v7s are attractive. As a matter of fact, I'll even be checking out the comment section for someone to explain that to me. So, enough about that. Like I said before, I'll go ahead and be checking out that comment section, because you just cannot convince me of how 7v7s are attractive. Is it more accessible? It might be. But that's not Killzone. When I first played Killzone 2, it was pure havoc. It was pure hell. Either you sank or you swim. Either you killed or you died trying. There was no, there was none, there was gore, there was ruckus. People had rocket launchers. They were spamming grenades. It was crazy. And either you can deal with it, or you gave up and you saw it as being too difficult and too chaotic or extreme. Same thing with Killzone 3. A lot of people, for whatever reason, they say Killzone 3 is garbage. Dude, I had a wonderful time. I had tons of good times in Killzone 3. Always. All the time. I have so many memories from, the Boulevard, Bilgarsk, the Snowdrift. All of these maps. It was great. Now, a lot of people, they made a big deal about it because it was a little different than Killzone 2, for which I think some of the things like map customizations and having your own lobby and all like that, yes, that was different, but the overall game, the basic mechanics were basically the same. There was no different. So as far as player options, yes, they changed the player options. But aside from the player options, the fundamentals were basically the same. I loved Killzone 3, just as I loved Killzone 2, just as I loved Killzone Shadow Fall. But them listening to these noobs and to these casuals is really destroying the game. So enough about that. Another thing I want to talk about, one of the guys that's on my friends list, he kind of posted a question in the forum, so I figured I'll go ahead and address it. So he asked the question, like, why do people focus on challenges? Like, is it to esteem themselves after that number next to their name? Personally, the challenges, I like working toward challenges. I don't really care about, how it looks, how other people interpret the number next to my name. I like it because it gives me a sense of accomplishment. Now, other people may see it as being tedious. I like working toward it. Right at this point, I think I have around 1,900 and 20 or 25 challenges completed. I have somewhere around 300 to go and I'll be done. There's some guys that have completed more challenges than myself. A couple guys in particular I can think of is one person I play with pretty often, One Hit a Quitter. Another guy, and I don't want to mispronounce his name, but this is how I read it. I think it's like Magid. It's like Magid. That guy's got, I think he's got like 2,100 challenges completed. So that guy's been putting in work. And keep in mind, there are some people who actively work toward their challenges, like myself. Then you have other people who create war zones just so they can, go ahead, partner up with buddies. And let's just say the insurgent class, for example. And they will grab like 4 or 5 of their buddies, lay, turrets down and everything else. And basically they'll just go on a ring around the rosy and hack them. The brigade doesn't do that. I actively play toward completing my challenges throughout my own gameplay. I like it because it personally it gives me a sense of accomplishment. Right, and it feels good to me seeing that I've invested a lot of time in each class. Now, if it were up to me, I would probably go back to the standard ranking system, private, corporal, sergeant, lieutenant. But what I would do is I would maintain the challenges. But another thing that I would do, which I think it's kind of cool, let's just say for ranks, any rank below sergeant, they would have like the Killzone 2 styled uniform. Right, so in other words, if you're under sergeant, you would look like some of the Killzone 2 players. Anywhere from sergeant to let's just say from sergeant to under lieutenant, you would have a different uniform. So in other words, when people are playing, they can look at a player and say, okay, well, that guy is experienced. You wouldn't necessarily have a number attached to your name, but someone can have a general idea by simply looking at how you look that you have more experience than some of these others. Because in other words, it's a good identifying marker. That's how I would do it. If you were from, lieutenant to, let's just say, up to colonel, you would have a different armor set. And if you had from 1-star general up to 4 or 5-star general, you would have the final armor set. And once you have unlocked them all, you would have the option to change your character's look. And your character's look would be based upon all previous Killzone games. So any look from any character in any Killzone game, even going back to the Killzone 1, that's once you finally reach 1-star general, you would have the option to dress your character like any of the previous Killzone characters. That's me personally. So that would be my reasons for pursuing challenges, number one. And that would also be my suggestions for changing the numerical ranking system to a more traditional ranking system with a little more incentive. Because in other words, I mean, it's kind of cool to have the option to change how your character looks, especially for a lot of the Killzone 1, 2, 3, and Shadow Fall vets who may, like let's just say I want to look like a Killzone 3 tactician. I mean, I would love for my support class guy to look like the Killzone 3 tactician, or like the Killzone 3 medic, or like the Killzone 2 scout class or whatever the case may be. I think that would be cool, but that's just my personal suggestion. All right, so enough about that. So one of the reasons why I believe Killzone isn't as big as some of these other titles, and a lot of these people are saying, there's a lot of things that you could do to get it as big. Number one, I doubt if Guerrilla Games has the financial backing as a studio that produces Call of Duty, or let's just say DICE. So number one, the budget constraints. And because you may have certain budget limitations, obviously you may have staff limitations. But despite all of that, I really think that the Killzone franchise is a great one. Now, were there some necessary changes made? Yes. Case in point, I think it was necessary for them to buff the camera rad and for them to buff the, let's just say, the Stova. Because the Stova at the game's release was garbage. The rate of fire was fine, but at the end of the day, it was just basically too shaky, right? The recoil was horrible, absolutely horrible. But a lot of these other changes that they're really making this game for casuals, in my personal opinion, and they're forgetting what Killzone is about. Killzone has never been a hand-holding game. Never been a hand-holding franchise. And if you guys came from Killzone 2 or Killzone 3, you guys would know that. So let's just say they changed the petricite grenades. Originally, the petricite grenades, whether they were thrown by your own team or by the opposing team, they were the same color, and they would damage you whether it was a friendly or whether it was an enemy thrown. Now, keep in mind, if it was an enemy, if the enemy threw a petricite grenade, it would damage you faster. But you would still take in damage from a friendly petricite grenade, which I was fine with. Because in other words, once you saw it, you just knew that you had to run. It didn't really bother me. And the friendly petricite grenades damaged you a lot slower, so it wasn't like you would die from it. But then they changed the petricite to its core, to where its core was red, which I was totally fine with that. The core was red. All you had to do was point at it. In other words, all you needed was a little initiative and not just sitting there with your thumb in your ass, with a sign asking for help. No, dude, it was at its core. As long as you pointed at it, you knew that it was an enemy. Oh, well, it looks like this will be the end of this video. You know what? I'm going to make a part 2 of this particular video because I want to continue to talk about a few things. So I hope you guys enjoyed part 1. I'm going to continue this into part 2. And hey, until next time, Martyrs Brigade is out.